Hey fam, welcome back. Hopefully you're doing good and having a great day. If you're not, please let me know what I do to help you. Until then, have a video from Kate Ann Mitchell. I saw this in a reaction from Bo a little bit ago, and I wanted to do a video on it. Just been a lot of other places, and so let's go ahead and take a look into it.
Where are we meeting the men that don't suck? Where are we finding them?
Where are all the good men?
Where are all the good men at?
Where have all the good men gone?
Where are all the good men?
Where do I find the nice guy that wants?
You want a guy, a respectable kind of guy, dressed like that. The jokes write themselves.
It's a simple, healthy relationship.
Where are the good men at? Where
Healthy relationship, and you're wearing shit like that, bro. Dude, come on.
they at? How do I meet them? Where do I go?
Girls, where the fuck are you finding good men?
You say you want a good man, but ask yourself this. Would the man that you want the woman that you've become? 63% of men under the age of 30 are single. But that's not the whole story. In fact, 61% of men ages 18 to 29 say they want to be in a committed relationship, compared to only 50% of women. Yet everywhere we turn, there's a woman who's asking, why does it feel like there are no good men left? Maybe it's not that they're gone. Maybe they're just done with the rules of a rigged game. This video is for the women who want a...
So, this is what has been done to us. And I want you all to understand what's going on. I keep saying this almost every single time that I cover this topic. We have been socially engineered to hate each other, to despise the idea of commitment, despise the idea of duty to the family, and really hate the nuclear family, something that's always worked for the average person. And look, this isn't a man versus woman, woman versus man kind of thing. First of all, for the men, I'm speaking to you right now. You got to get out of this red pill rage, because it's not serving anyone. It's not serving you in the long run, and it's not doing anything to fix the issues, especially for the black pillars who are outright just turning away from society in general. That's only accelerating our downfall. That's all that it's doing. It's not, I understand your plight, but it's not doing anything to help the situation. For my ladies, you have to stop believing in this victimhood mentality. You have to stop believing that you are a victim every single turn that you take. All of us have been indoctrinated against our best interest. And the whole purpose of that is to push us to be worker bees for the people who actually run the country. That's what it is. And I'll get more into the vote and everything like that a little later on, but a lot of people don't know this, and I didn't know this until recently, that the CIA actually did co-opt feminism. And we know it, and here's the thing, even from the start, feminism was in itself a toxic ideology, because you have to understand that anything that comes about that doesn't have any safeguards against the ugliness of human nature is bound to be corrupted. And feminism was definitely one of them. A minority of women were pushing for, it wasn't even equality. From the start, it wasn't equality. I know for a fact that quite a few of the debates back then, women did see themselves as superior. They absolutely did. If you look at some of the literature back then of the debates, it's very obvious. And then you also look at the behavior from the early 1900s, it's the same thing. A lot of these women were taken to the streets, burning things to the ground, threatening politicians. I mean, they were just setting explosives everywhere, all kinds of shit. I mean, violating police out in the streets during their parades or their marches or protests. It wasn't peaceful from the start. There was no good intention from the start. If there was, then these women wouldn't have done the things that they did. They wouldn't have become militant, because they wouldn't have had to. But most of what was going on between the anti-suffragists and the suffragists were women fighting amongst themselves. Because you had women who were the anti-suffragists who were like, this is against your best interest. You better not do it. You're going into a man's world, and that's not where, we belong. Well, after they got what they wanted, and then decades upon decades of social engineering, more and more so through each generation, we've come to a head now. So that's where we're at.
But that's not the whole story. In fact, 61% of men ages 18 to 29 say they want to be in a committed relationship, when in fact, we do. This is for those of you who believe in commitment, love, and the depth of what is real over what just feels good right now. And to be transparent, this won't be an easy video, and I will be the first to admit that I don't have this all figured out. However, I do believe that there are fundamental flaws that have eroded the very fabric of relationships. And by the time you watch this video all the way to the end, you'll understand.
Well, let's take a step back here. So she was talking about people wanting something right now because it feels good instead of actually wanting a relationship. I think one thing that's really important to note is that a part of social engineering, and a lot of people don't really think about this, think of how we've been incentivized to shorten our attention span. You know what I'm saying? Through DoorDash, through social media like YouTube Shorts, TikToks. We expect things to happen right now. And when we don't get it right now, we often don't want it. Or we don't put effort in to get it ourselves. The other thing, too, is though when we do get it, we don't respect it because then it's so easily had. That's the paradox that we exist in today, is that we want something super easy, but we don't want something super easy. It doesn't make any sense. And of course, this is going to affect relationships. And this is why people can't get past the honeymoon phase, right? Or the first 3 months in a relationship. People can't survive past that. And it is majority women who can't do that. It really is. Because, again, women have been indoctrinated to believe that they can have it all. And, again, if they don't have it all right now, then it's not worth it. And as soon as things get hard, like relationships instead of situationships, which is what I mentioned earlier, they start looking to situationships because that's what makes them feel good. So it's a part of the social engineering. A lot of people don't realize just how everywhere it is. And it's so much of an incentive to shorten our attention spans because we get that dopamine hit. We just swipe through on our phones, doom scrolling, and we just find something quick and easy to laugh at. And then in turn, it's going to rewire your brain to accept the shortest path or the path of least resistance.
Exactly how we got here, and how the things that you believe are in your best interest may in fact be harming you. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. It started as a fight for rights, and it morphed into a war on roles. And now, it's
a war for roles?
As a fight for rights, and it morphed into a war on roles. And
yeah, it started as a war on roles. I mean, they did I think millions of dollars of damage. Yeah.
Now, it's a religion without redemption. This book is one that I recommend everybody reads. It reveals the esoteric and spiritual roots of feminism as rebellion. And not just against men, but against nature and order itself. In the effort to see this from an alternative perspective to the narrative that you have probably been fed about feminism, I ask you to keep an open mind to what I'm about to share with you. I'm going to dive into each wave and show you how
this is more specifically attuned to women. Women, listen, when you're going into topics like this, you absolutely have to keep an open mind because, as you know, you have been taught from childhood that women are victims no matter what, that you should be rebellious, you should be confronting, you should get it all, sis, you should, you don't need a man, you should have everything that you ever wanted in life. And even if that goes against your nature, which is something that you cannot win against his nature, but you have to keep an open mind because what you are learning here is in your best interest. if you want a family, if you want a good man like you say you do, have an open mind. The Happy Wife School is another really good YouTube channel to go check out as well, because she used to be one of those wives that really did a number on her husband, and she didn't even really understand what was going on, but she learned what she was doing was not healthy. But it's the conditioning all the way throughout your life that has put you in this precarious situation to where you're self-sabotaging your relationships, not just with romantic relationships, but everything, coworkers, friends, family, everything. Women have been lied to, and oh, holy shit, have they been lied to so bad. Oh my God, so bad. No wonder women are more depressed today than what they have ever been, despite having the most freedom and privileges that I would say moreover privileges they've ever had. So, man, I'm telling you, when you do a lot of digging into this, you really begin to believe that you cannot hate your government. Those at the top who run the country enough. You couldn't hate them enough.
This movement has shifted drastically, potentially radically, over time. There are many narratives and beliefs held that feminism is either the best thing that has ever happened or the absolute worst. But unlike other waves that came, the first wave of feminism was focused on maintaining the order and nurture between men and women. The pioneers in this first wave, like Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Stanton, and Sojourner Truth, framed their arguments not in terms of overthrowing the patriarchy or embracing the spiritual rebellion, but in terms of moral responsibility, justice, and civic duty. Many were abolitionists and temperance advocates, campaigning against things like slavery, domestic abuse, and alcohol abuse, which were destroying families. And I personally see this as an era where women were fighting for family, for order, not against it. First wave feminists sought basic legal protection and recognition, the right to vote, property rights for married women, access to education, and legal recourse in abuse.
So one thing that's really missed is that all of this was more of a religious context. You have to understand the time period that this was in. Most people were considered Christian, right? So the fact of the matter is that it's not that women didn't have rights. Women weren't protected, because women all throughout history have always been the people who have been protected the most, actually. And obviously the reason for that is because they could have babies, right? So they've always been placed at a higher value than even children. What a lot of people don't know is that there have been property rights for women. Of course there have been. They have been able to have their own businesses. When Jamestown was founded, a lot of women had property that they had owned themselves. They also had businesses that they owned themselves as well, and they were very heavily participating in the economy. Absolutely they were. And so this idea that women have never had property rights, they've never had right to vote, that doesn't make any sense. Because back to the religious context, this is where you can never separate religion and state. You can never do it, because they will always be one. Religion will always dictate, because it's morals and values that dictate laws and policies, right? So you cannot separate the two. That being said, when a woman became married, all of the responsibility then transferred to the husband, because the husband had then accepted the responsibility of what it meant to become one flesh within Christianity, right? So it's not that they lost their rights, it's that the women would step down as, one, they were expected to, and two, a lot of women did in their best interest anyways. So it's not that women did want a business or didn't want a business. They just understood the roles that they needed to play, because it is what nature calls for. It is nature. It is women's nature to do that. Women, like I said, for the longest time, women will always be happiest married and with children. And that means they are submissive. They are compliant with their husbands. It's not that they don't have any weight to their word. It's not that they don't have any authority at all. It's just that's how nature has always made it so. And the right to vote, this is where a lot of people get mixed up too, is that, again, in religious context, the family did everything as one. And so one vote was considered a vote for the family. Obviously, since the women weren't involved in the public spaces, they would expect their husbands to make the decisions. So it's not that they didn't have a right to vote. It's that they understood, again, also through religious context, they had expected their men to make the decisions. And they attended to their responsibilities, which was inside the home. So, and women have always had access to education as well. They have always had access to education. It's just that the majority of women didn't do that. Again, they were brought up to take care of the home. And that's how it's always been, as nature calls for.
Marriages. These demands were not about erasing sex-based differences, but about correcting clear injustices, ones that left women legally voiceless and financially trapped. These reforms aligned with natural law and biblical principles of justice, not oriented towards social upheaval. Now, I want to be clear that my positions are not to shove religion down your throat, nor are they to put me on some moral high ground. But it's also important to at least acknowledge that when we removed religion, we had to replace it with something. The erosion of Christianity didn't just impact our churches. It impacted cultural values that held our society together. And furthermore, opened the door in which this revolution could just walk right through. First wave feminists, for the most part, did not seek to erase the differences between men and women. They weren't trying to become men or mock men. Instead, they emphasized complementary roles, that women had a moral and...
I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that based on some of the literature that I've already read. Christianity should have been, when we began to move more into the scientific way of understanding life, the universe, ourselves, we should have replaced Christianity with something morals and values wise. Instead of encouraging people to indulge in their most degenerate desires, right? Hookup culture, vanity, materialism, right? This is exactly what I mean when I say that when something comes about that isn't safeguarded from the ugliness of human nature, it's doomed from the start. So, and now we are reaping the repercussions of those who came before us because there was no safeguard. Matter of fact, and this is where I'm talking about the CIA, all of this was pushed forward. There was no, or not much anyways, pushback against or safeguarding against the toxicity that could come from all of this happening. And so you definitely see that this was absolutely deliberate. When women got the right to vote, that meant more votes for politicians. And through social engineering with feminism, and that was co-opted through the CIA, women were convinced to go to work. So now today, you have over 50% of the workforce is represented by women, which is, and it's also interesting to note too that the majority of women are not working laborious jobs. They're working more office jobs. They are working for companies doing meaningless jobs like we had covered in quite a few videos prior. So women have been convinced to break away from the family when it comes to voting, break away from the family when it comes to resources, and then also women have been convinced to commodify their bodies to essentially reduce themselves to an object, because a little later on came Margaret Sanger, who then pushed for sexual liberation, right? Have sex with whoever you want to have sex with. And, we see where that's taken us. And see, we're seeing now that women have done nothing more than reduce themselves to their bodies now. So, and then Margaret Sanger was also a eugenicist as well, which is what a lot of people don't know, who was also one of the ones that had co-founded Planned Parenthood and had pushed for the Plan B pill, which also really messes with women emotionally, chemically. I mean, really does a number on women. And so all of this does not serve women at all. At all. But where do men fit in all of this? Well, because we're not going to watch the whole video here. You know, through the social engineering of feminism and then the laws and policies that came with that, affirmative action, no fault divorce, all of this stuff, it's really incentivized men to not play the game, essentially, to just not partake in society, especially with women. And then there's also the Disney culture as well, where women from childhood have been indoctrinated to believe that whoever they fall in love with is some Prince Charming, some perfect dude that has status, that has good looks, that's fit, strong, and will do anything, even becoming a simp, to travel 3,000 miles on foot just to kiss some toes, you know. You know. And so for men, we were taught from an early age that we should do everything that we can to make women happy, and at the expense of ourselves, to throw away what we want, to throw away our preferences, to not care about us, to care about what everyone else wants and needs above our own wants and needs. So when you have generations of men who have been conditioned this way, that's where a lot of men turn into fuckboys, turn into black pillars who just walk away from society in general. That is what's really going on. It's honestly, it's nature. This is nature happening before our very eyes. One of the most important things when it comes to men is that they are respected for what they do, right? The value that they bring, they deserve to be respected for that. And men aren't respected. But then but also on the other hand too is that men have also had their futures stolen from them. You know, back in the 50s and 60s, men could go to work in a factory, you know, and pay off a house in 2 to 3 years, be able to afford a family, a wife, 2.5 kids, and, you know, the white picket fence, a couple dogs, and, you know, a couple cars. Men could have done that. And today, men can hardly take care of themselves, if at all. And so, and we, of course, we all know what women want, right? Protector, provider. And the majority of men just cannot compete with that anymore. Just can't do it. This is where men are at. So until someone comes along, an average, everyday guy comes along and does what needs to be done to bring average men back up to where they were, then nothing's going to change. There needs to be order. There needs to be rule. There needs to be hierarchy. Right now, there is none. We need to return to the way things were. We need to go back to what worked, where women were depending on men. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't matter what status a woman gets. She's always going to look for a man that is better than her. That's just how women are. They want to feel safe. They want to feel like a woman. They want to feel like you got this. She doesn't have to worry about a single thing with you, that you will take care of it. And that in itself is dependency. It is dependency. There is no independence. There is no individuality when it comes to committed relationships. When you commit to one another, you are a team. Your identity is, I mean, of course, still there because you're going to be your individual persons, right? You're going to have things that you like, and you're going to have things that you don't like. And that makes sense, right? But there is no such thing as individualism when it comes to committed relationships. Because at that point, you're not going to be able to cooperate. A car cannot have two drivers, or else it's going to crash, right? So there's always going to be a dependency from the woman and the man, of course, right? That the man's going to depend on the woman to take care of the home, make sure everything is in working order when he comes back from gathering resources. And the woman is going to depend on the man to continue to bring those resources back home and to protect her when she needs that protection. So until average men stand up and do something to make a difference, to make a change, this is only going to get worse. And with AI, as powerful as it is now, and pretty soon here going to reach general intelligence. We're in for a rude awakening, both men and women. And it's going to be the have-nots, the average people, who are going to suffer the most. I'm just going to leave it there because we've already talked about a lot here. Let's read a couple of comments. The problem is women want a 1950s man while we get a 2025 woman. Men say no thanks. Well, yes, because the culture today incentivizes women to act the way that they do, right? We have too many simps who would dish out $15 million on OnlyFans content. So until we nip that in the bud, nothing's really going to change. He's nice, but we had a great time, but that's where they are. That's a lot of women these days. That's true. That is true. And that there needs to be more discussion in women's spaces as well. And I'm glad she's one of the ones that's really talking about this stuff too. Can't build a life with someone that hates you on a subconscious level. Yes, again, because they've been indoctrinated to. And it's going to be increasingly difficult to rewrite that because it's on a deep, deep, deep level, right? This is generational. So to undo that is going to be extremely difficult, which is why the more talk in women's spaces, the better. All right, well, we will read one more. My favorite take on feminism is that women thought they were freeing themselves from oppression. What they did instead was to free men from the very real chains of responsibility and care. It is also very telling that women have adopted all of their new freedoms but still expect men to stay yoked. That one fact says everything about the contempt that women have for men. Well, no, I would actually no, I would disagree with that. There's missing the point. Some women wanted this, not all women. The majority of women in the late 1800s, early 1900s were either against the idea of women leaving the private spaces and going into the public spaces, or just didn't really care for it. So it's not that they wanted to take more responsibility. It's not. It's not that. It's that a minority of women wanted to be men. Essentially, they wanted to be their own man, and this is what it's led to. Of course, I don't have everything figured out. I'm still researching. I'm still looking into stuff. I'm still learning. So don't be too harsh on me in the comments. But let me know what you guys think. I want to go ahead and leave that there. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll link the video down below in the description so you guys can watch the full video. Let me know what you guys think. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. Please be sure to take care of yourselves, both mind and body. Make sure to take care of each other as well. That's all we have at the end of the day is each other. So if you need me for anything, please reach out. I'm always here. My door is always open. I love you all. I wish you a lovely day, and I'll talk to you guys soon.